story, the next icebreaker, called Past the Breaking Point. Please welcome Kyle for Past the Breaking Point.
Why am I here today? For as long as I can remember, I've always had this longing to live abroad. I think it comes from my mom, who would share these amazing stories about her experience living in Japan, where she taught English for a couple of years. So I thought, what better way to live abroad than doing an exchange program? And I thought, how about I go to the country where I was born, right here in the Netherlands? Now, an exchange program is where you go and live with a host family in a country outside of your own. And this host family volunteers to have you as pretty much an extra child in their family for 1 year. They feed you, they maybe clothe you, they teach you about their country and hopefully something about their culture. Now, just like that, I was off. This was my big year. I was finally going abroad. Now, my expectations for this big year abroad were, pretty much what I had back home, but, in like a foreign country. Warm weather, warm people, warm food. But when I got to the Netherlands, the weather was cold, the people were kind of cold, and the sandwiches were definitely cold. Now, I was placed with a host family way up in the north of the Netherlands in a tiny town called Donderen. Now, Donderen is so small, there's more cows than people. More cows than people. I had to bike 1 hour to school and 1 hour home. And no one actually told me that I'd be fighting the wind going both directions. But apparently that's how life is here in the Netherlands. And then there was my host family. Now, they spoke a little bit of English, but after a certain point, I was expected to only speak Dutch with them. But the problem with that was that I didn't speak Dutch. The couple of weeks of Duolingo practice had not prepared me for this. And then there was my host sister. See, I grew up with an older brother, and we shared everything growing up. My host sister was an only child. And I had borrowed a book of my host sister. And this book had been sitting on a coffee table for weeks. She hadn't touched it. It's just sitting there. And one day I came home, I walked in the front door, and boom, a big eruption of yelling and screaming, and she was having this tantrum upstairs. And she was speaking Dutch, so I couldn't really make out what she was saying, but I could hear a couple of words. American, book, asshole, mistake. She was furious with me that I just borrowed her book. And I realized we had such different expectations for what could be shared. And all of this just built up, and I felt like I didn't belong there. I felt like they didn't want me, like I wasn't welcome anymore. Like there had been some big mistake. I'd reached a breaking point. I then called the exchange organization and told them I either needed a new host family or I was going back to the US. And my exchange year was over. They then sent out a volunteer to our house, and we sat down with my host family, and through a bit of debate, I decided, I'd stick on for a couple more weeks. This was my big dream. I had finally made it here. Just after that, I went on a school trip. We went to Austria. It was amazing. And on the bus ride home, I was thinking about what I was returning to in that little cow town. And I realized I was excited to see them, that I missed my host family for some odd reason. Something about going through this really difficult, challenging experience and choosing to stay had shifted my perspective from being a victim of a bad host family matchup to being an active participant in this exchange experience. Now, after that, the year wasn't perfect, but I'm still in really close touch with my host family, and just a couple of weeks ago, they met my real mom here in Amsterdam. And I learned through this experience that being able to persist and push through these challenging and difficult experiences you can find the best outcomes. The best things happen. Now, back in 2020, I decided I wanted to move back here and make it my full-time home. My exchange year was so amazing, I was willing to do anything to get here. It was my big goal again. Now, turns out getting a job here is really hard. I applied to job after job and faced rejection after rejection after rejection. And then my girlfriend broke up with me. And then a global pandemic was crashing down on this dream of mine to come back to the Netherlands. Could it get any worse? Was I ever going to make it back here? But I climbed and I clawed and I was persistent and focused on getting back here. And eventually I made it. And eventually I'm here. So I wonder, are there things you're close to giving up on that if you were to persist and push a little bit further, they could make a huge impact and difference on your life? I encourage you to head on straight onto these things, to face them head on, because they can make all the difference in your life. I'm here because of it. Thank you.